Greetings, welcome to Extra Hours, part of the officehours.global network. Find out more, officehours.global/join. So tonight we have a special panel, very special. I've chosen the two people that can speak eloquently about many topics and in a verbose manner. Two people that we don't need a large panel when we have Alex and Carl. So Alex, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. Had a good weekend. We did some live streaming. It was kind of fun.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear some more about that. And Carl from Adelaide, South Australia, just down the road from me. Good to have you here. How are you?
Nice to be here. It's a nice winter's day here. So we've just gone past the winter solstice here in the Southern Hemisphere.
Okay, little quick weather update. Now, we were just, I was just asking because I knew you'd know, why did the rocket blow up? What's the 30-second version?
So the 30-second version, according to Elon Musk, is there was a nitrogen bottle, probably a 2 or 3 meters long cylinder in the top of that particular the Starship that looked like it popped. It released nitrogen into the top part of the Starship, which caused it to overpressurize and pretty much unzip. So kind of just imagine like a balloon popping at the top, which caused the small fuel tanks that are right at the top of the rocket to ignite. And then they ignited the larger fuel tanks down below. But this has happened before, so people who've been watching this for a long time remember SN3, SN4. SN4 was a big bang. So we've seen this heaps of times. It's just now that this particular rocket is becoming more popular to the mainstream media, it just gets more coverage. But this is like the 5th time this has happened. So not a big problem.
Not a big problem, but how much did it cost?
So we know that the Raptors cost about $1 million each, and we know there were 6 Raptors on board. And then the rocket itself, we don't know exactly how much it costs to build the actual Starship, but the tiles would be expensive. So the actual rocket engines, which are 6 on board, and the tiles, we know they're the 2 high labor costs.
It was just a very expensive class. That's all. I mean, they're learning, so it's it just they took a class, and wow, man, that was so expensive.
You learn from failure more so than the successes, right? So there was lots to learn. So they would have turned around and said, "Thank you, everyone. That was very helpful." Speaking of learning and iteration, Alex, you're talking about the live stream that you did from the studio. There's some things that you would have learned.
Yeah, we learned a lot. It was one of those things that we're partnering with this the studio in Richmond to do some concerts, and I really think that not concerts, I guess I would say events that are out of studios. I feel like it's a huge market. I feel like the studios right now aren't definitely not where a lot of artists are going to do their albums. A lot of them are doing them in their bedrooms, in their home studios. The prices, the amount of money the artists are making, the amount of money the record companies have, and the amount of money and the cost of the production gear itself has driven a lot of artists, burrowed into their own space, and so that a lot of studios trying to figure out, they still have artists, they still make a difference for some artists, but it's harder and harder and harder for them to stay busy all the time. And I just feel like, these are the perfect spaces for kind of intimate music experiences where you don't have to, there's no expectation that there's going to be, if you take someone and put them on a stage and don't put anybody in the audience, they're like, what's wrong? But if you take them into a studio, no one's expecting people to be in the studio. So, and we can get, the cameras can be all nice and close. And so I think that there's something there, but we've, and I've done maybe, 10 or 15 shows in studios in the last decade. So stuff for Alicia Keys and John Mayer and Linkin Park and, a lot of, really cool things, but we only get to do it once in each place. Every studio is new and it's got its own challenges. And so we've been working on trying to find a studio, and hopefully this one will work. I mean, we're afraid we'll outrun our welcome if we cause too much trouble. So we're doing the best we can to kind of go into it. But at the same time, my daughter's band, a bunch of people are graduating. She's in high school. I thought it'd be fun to bring the band in and, do something that a high school student I would have always wanted to do, is go into a studio and, record. And so they were able to come in. We went to Airship Laboratories and did the shoot. The problem is that they just had a bunch of things going on. And so they said, well, you shouldn't use that day. And I was like, well, that's the only day I have. And they said, well, you can use it, but we don't have any support for you. You just have to kind of create a bubble. And that created an opportunity for me to learn, a lot. We decided we wanted to build our own in-ear system, so we kind of figured out how to do that. We learned a lot about. I'm used to instruments, and I'm used to audio, not used to instrument impedance and unbalanced cables. like it becomes this huge problem. Like, hey, I'd like to put the amp somewhere in some other room. It's easy to do everything except for how do I run from the guitar to the amp, and you're deciding that on the day of. So it's not like you can go out and order a bunch of things, which is what I would have done otherwise if I thought about it a couple of days earlier. But we were making that decision kind of on the fly. And then you realize, like, oh, this is why all these drummers, I've never been in a studio that didn't like encase the drummer in some plexiglass or something like that, and you get very clear why. Does
the studio have multiple rooms? Does it?
They do, and it was. They have
Yeah.
vocal booths, and but we wanted to kind of keep the band together because we were shooting it, so that was part of the challenge as well. So there's a whole bunch of things that we were learning, and that's why we did it, was so that we could learn, so we want to figure it out. Want to figure out what the cameras look like. Where do we like where the cameras went? We definitely liked a bunch of parts of that. There's definitely moments, and we're going to recut them all, I think. And we had some great volunteers from office hours came in. So Scott Tupper and Rocket came in, and my son and I were shooting, and so Scott was cutting the show, and Rocket was managing the audio, and my brother, I always call him my brother, but my son and I do so much together. I think of him as my brother at this point.
Because you look up to him.
I do look well physically. I do look up to him.
That's right.
And so he's very much bigger than I am. So anyway, but I think that what's interesting is that I feel like with studios, everybody's kind of done something, and the only people that have done KEXP in Seattle and Tiny Desk at NPR are the only ones that have gotten where they've cooked the bread almost. Like they're pretty close to a cooked piece of bread. Almost every other studio that does this, I feel like they throw in some cheap little PTZ cameras, and they feel like that's going to be enough. And I'm like, it's not enough. It's not cooked. Still dough. And then they decide it doesn't work. And so I really want to take this and turn the and see if we can't look at a way that could affect a lot of studios, not just what we want to do, but so we want to publish everything, show, if it starts to get successful, people like it, and I'm, of course, being me, I want it to be 4K, 60, HDR, 5.1 coming out of it live. That's and by the end of the summer, if all goes well, if they keep us, we'll go to another studio, but if they keep us, we'll get there by the end of the summer. We'll be doing some pretty high res experiences, and then we're going to add all the interactivity so that they're all there and people can come in over Zoom and talk to them. Some super fans might be able to come in and talk to them over Zoom. We'll take questions from Okana. All that stuff is the other pieces to add. And I think they make more sense. That's what I found as someone who streamed, shows that are, everything from small shows to Metallica and everything else and everything in between. The time to have those personal conversations is not in a stadium show. It's in these little studios. They're going to record a couple songs and then talk about it and everything else. And I think that I think that the model could work really well. And so we're trying to unwrap it. We're going to do it again. I think if we can find another band, we're going to do it again this weekend. And then I have another month before I can do it again. So we were like, hey, I can do it next week, or I can do it in a month. And they were interested in doing it there. And so we'll find out. We kind of put the feelers out, have people do that.
Yeah, it's exciting because I think that we've been talking about this sort of stuff for 5 years, and longer before that. But I think it's becoming even more appealing in the context of like AI music and production techniques and things like that are like you're making particular music is. Well, I guess it just contributes to the noise that there is, the content noise in the world. There's so much of it now, including, just spin up a song and, write the words and do the music and away it goes. And it sounds okay. It sounds fine. But there is something about the humanity of seeing a small group of people with mastery playing together and creating something new. That's something that I enjoy about jazz is improvisation. But I think in any style, when there's a live environment like that, when you sort of get insight as people are sharing a little bit, they're talking, answering some questions, and then starting to play, and you're hearing something very familiar to you. If you know the song, you've heard it on the album many times, but then there's something a little bit different about it. I think that is something that people have. I guess it's an ongoing argument as to whether when you go to a concert, are you wanting to hear exactly the same as the album, or are you wanting to hear something new or a new take on it? There's a fine balance, right? Because I think when you want to hear the same thing, but you also want to get an experience of it happening live.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting is that the balance, because I've been doing so much of the going to live shows, both for work and then also my daughter's going to more shows, and so we go to, and my son comes to a couple of them as well. One of the things I noticed is, for the songs that a lot of people aren't going to sing to, it's kind of fun to listen to them just jam, right? They're going to do, but the funny thing is that what's important is if you're going to do the big anthems that the audience knows, you really need to play them pretty close to what they were originally, or the audience doesn't know when to jump in and be part of the thing, And so unless you're doing a lot of work with the audience to work that out, and I think that it's funny. I've seen people comment and go, I don't know why everybody's singing. I came here to see the band. I'm kind of like, well, I mean, you can do that kind of anytime. The real thing is that the value is the unified experience with a bunch of other people, and that's what we're working on with the theaters, is kind of trying to figure that out as well.
One thing that would be interesting in the theaters is there's a clip that kind of went pretty viral. I saw of now I can't even remember her name, that was doing the Vegas shows for a while.
Celine Dion, Adele.
Newer Adele, thank you. Adele, there's a clip of someone who was standing up and dancing and kept getting asked to sit down. People behind them saying, sit down, and security comes, gets them to sit down, and she famously points and said, don't stop him from sitting down, right? This is what it's about. Everyone stand up. So it'll be interesting in cinemas in that sort of experience as to whether, it's designed for everyone to be seated.
Yeah. I can tell you that when we did on some of the shows, in some of the shows, I think a lot of people stayed seated and enjoyed it that we've done so far. But when we did 2 shows with Ye, and everyone was on their seats, on the seats and all over the seats. And in fact, my concern was not whether they're going to sit. I mean, it was crazy. I only saw a couple of them get posted on Twitter, and it was Twitter at the time, I think. And people were just like, "Whoa, what is going on?" And people were just having, I don't know, because he was playing some songs that were not things he had played for a decade, and so people got super excited, and they were taking video of it, and so anyway, so it became less of will people stand up and more of can the theaters survive if people get that excited all the time for lots of bands. And so, but I will say that I've been testing, and if you're wondering about whether it's good to listen to an album in a full on movie theater by yourself, it's awesome. Right. I test the sound systems, and I sit there and I play I wonder what this song would sound like, because I'm collecting good 5.1, good surround stuff. Is that going to sound good? Is this gonna, and then what are my dB levels when I'm, at what level, what level is that versus and there's a lot of things that I'm paying I have to test the footage, and it's we should just do album release parties. That would be enough.
Oh yeah. Yeah, those big as well, but to experience that, it's a different experience. Good pair of headphones versus.
So last weekend I saw the Hans Zimmer Diamond in the Desert. So this is a concert film, very interesting. He's been doing these now for 10 years or so, this live performances. But this Diamond in the Desert was interesting. I've seen 2 others of his concert films. I saw it in the cinema. So what they did was they intermixed probably 3 or 4 tracks. So let's say there's 12 tracks total in the whole concert. They're long tracks because they come from film. So he did 3 or 4 of them external to the actual. So this was recorded in Dubai, middle of last year. It looks like it was a Dubai Tourism Commission that asked him to come, and they arranged all this and did all the filming. And so they wanted to show off a bit more of Dubai than just inside of a concert venue. And so 3 or 4 songs were actually done outside, where they took over an enormous space with some of them. And he performs live, and there's no space, and they film him on with cameras and everything. But the interesting thing is I stopped myself from watching any behind the scenes for the last year until this came out in cinemas. So there's a lot of behind the scenes of how they made this, and it's very different to all the runs he's done it before. So I made sure I wanted to see it in cinemas before I watched how they did it. And now that in the last week I've been watching all the how they did it, and it is kind of bonkers. Like, he's got his original crew that he's had for like the last 10 years, who one focuses on the mics to the desk and pretty much to the mix. That's it. And that's where that person stops. There's another person next to them that controls from the desk to the speakers and what people hear in the room. And then there's a whole other system, of course, for recording for the theatrical, for the record, for what they're going to show in cinemas. That's a whole other thing which they edit. But the live thing is really interesting. And they took the actual live, essentially the A1, but that's not really their position. And he walked on stage and said, okay, we've got like 5 percussion areas. These are live percussions. And you've got to think, okay, in the front row, they're going to hear the snare from the stage live, but then they're also going to hear the snare from the front field speakers, because they're in the front row. And they talk about, we have 5 different percussion sections, so we have to line them all up. So the way they line them up in the room is very interesting. And then there's a whole lighting show and all that kind of stuff too, which goes on top of it. But the Eurovision behind the scenes video just came out for 2025. That is absolutely bonkers. So I'd like to hear Talak's. I'd like to show the video to Talak and then hear his response on the Eurovision, because that's the biggest lighting show that's probably ever been done in the world for a television show. They broke the software. So the software they use, they can run like how many lights on one system, and they broke it. And this software was designed specifically for these large events. So they had to actually run 3 independent systems. So you can have like 500 universes on one system. They went beyond that. And so they had to have 3 complete separate systems, and they said that worked out well anyway. But anyway, these kind of live shows, as I said with the Hans Zimmer one, there is a lot of thought into. They knew they were going to film it. They knew they were filming it for the theatrical release, but they also knew they had to do it for the 2 or 3 nights they were showing it. I think it was 2 nights. They did 2 concerts back to back, and filmed both nights. They also filmed the dress rehearsal. So you can tell, if you look carefully, I noticed this when I was watching it, the dress rehearsal, they don't have the marks. So the marks on the stage where you have to stand, they're not put down yet. So if you ever see like the stage, you don't see the crowd and the camera's relatively close and there's no marks on the stage, that's them filming the dress rehearsal. And then if you see the marks on the stage, or you see the crowd, of course, then it's one of the 2 nights.
It's one of the other 2.
So they edit and they edit it's really interesting. I'd like to get the Blu-ray now, watch a Blu-ray whenever it's released, and see and go back and watch how many different nights. You can tell the different nights. Nothing really changes on stage too much, but for those marks, because of where people have to stand, which are only there during the show. The lighting cues are obviously it's a dress rehearsal, so it's exactly the same pretty much.
What's the venue? Is it outside?
The Coca-Cola Arena in Dubai. No, that was inside, but they did do 1, 2, 3, 4 different songs outside. But Dubai doesn't rain so much, so all at night, no, one was during the day. So they did one during the day, all the rest were at night in Dubai. And and then the rest was all inside. Now, of course, the inside, what the audience were hearing, they're hearing just a live performance on the stage. What we see is this special cutaway. In the theatre, we see a special cutaway to this location shoot they do. They're still performing live, but it's a location shoot on top of what we hear. Yeah.
Oh, I definitely want to see it. I'm guessing it wasn't. Is it still in the cinema? I don't think it is. No,
it's one time only for Adelaide. So they're only showing it once per city. So it's kind of like a roadshow, but it'll be on Blu-ray and Blu-ray soon. So,
yeah, very cool. I wanted to say just a little hello to Sky and Vic chatting in the event in the chat along there in Meccana, and we've got a couple of questions there. Carl, we've got one there from Sky. Got that there
from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. How have you trained your digital assistant? Will it send your emails for you while talking to it on your phone? How else is it helping you? How is it helping your business be better?
Alex?
I don't have it really. I don't have anything in AI really running for me and doing things for me. I probably should. That's agentic AI that I just haven't really gotten myself into. I find that, and I think that part of it is that when I deal with other companies, even ones using AI, maybe I don't know that they're using AI, but it's so clear to me when someone's sending me something automatically, as opposed, and maybe that'll blur over time. But right now, it's really clear to me when it's happening, and I'm usually kind of turned off by it. Or not turned off by it, but yeah. I'm like, man, I don't care. Like, I don't care about, like, they don't care enough to do something with it. Now when I say that, I'm using AI all day. Like, I have, I think I've talked about it a million times. My button on my phone, I just push the button in and I say, Janet. That's from Janet from the Good Place. I just go, Janet. And ChatGPT pops up. And I get more and more adventurous about how far can I push this? Like I'll just say something, and I'll just randomly say something without a lot of context and see if Janet will answer the question well. And I'm always surprised, like at how quickly I get something back. Of course, I'm using MidJourney, and now MidJourney has video, which happened, I think, between the last show and this show. So I'm playing. What's fun is when you've got thousands and thousands of images in MidJourney, you just go through them and make them video. like just make this one video. And so I think I'm enjoying that. But the idea of having it, when I feel like communication is a personal thing, like even when people send me Calendary links or whatever, I rarely use them. I rarely just go. I mean, if you send me a Calendly link. Calendly link. The chances of me, if you say, hey, can we meet? And I say, yeah. And you say, I've got some windows here and there, and I'll go back and forth. That may seem like more work, but there's something about it that works for me in a way that, and maybe I'm just old, I don't know, but I want to have that negotiation back and forth. Because a lot of times Calendly is like, these are the windows and they're only 15 minutes long, and they're, like there's all this weird stuff in it, and I just go, I'm not gonna do that. And I have to admit, my passive aggressive thing is that I just wait for someone to say, hey, when are we gonna get the calendar? Oh, I don't really understand how that works, and I just kind of go, and then eventually they just send me, hey, I've got windows here and here. I just kind of drag my feet until someone realizes that I don't like to use that product. And so and again, I just find that half the time it doesn't send me an email, and then it's my fault that I missed the meeting, and then like there's all this stuff, there's no trail, there's no nothing, and I just have, so that's my experience with all these assistants, is that everything that's done automatically is kind of not very good. Just kind of like it's when good enough is kind of the enemy of great, and I think that this kind of schlocky kind of, I'm going to send you a bunch of automated whatever, I think anyway, I don't want the assistant to do anything for me like that. Although I'm sure that if you talk to me in a year, I'll have it be doing everything, and it'll be turning things on and off for me and everything else. But right now I like to have control.
Yeah, Carl?
So for me, as far as emails going out, I just simply have templates, and I tweak templates. So that's generally how, when I have to send emails out for that kind of thing, I just tweak a template for that particular thing. And I work on the templates to change them every once in a while. So I guess I'm artificially tweaking stuff per email, but it is coming from a template that I'm only just reformatting a little bit. I've never thrown a template into AI and say, make it better, because my templates are pretty succinct anyway. I try to keep it that way, so it's not a long email. Kind of keep everything above the fold, as you will. The other thing, what I do use AI for is collating data. So if I want to see data in a table, so I'll use Grok or whatever, and I'll ask, okay, what is yada yada for, like, so let's keep it on office hours. I say, how many cameras were released between 2000 and 2020 that were full frame and that were above 10 megapixel? And you just ask Grok or whatever, any AI system, and you ask them to do a bit of a deep search and give me a table. It'll just give you a table of all the cameras that can do that. Or how many cameras can record raw internally for at least 24 frames a second at 4K. And it'll do that really quickly. So that's kind of where I like to use AI, is just to get data collated really quickly. I can go find all these, of course, but AI is actually getting quite good at now scraping the web at getting these kind of things. Anything that's kind of numbery kind of based is really easy. Anything that's relating to census data. So all the AIs have access to census data, which is really powerful. Used to have to pay a lot of money to get access to this kind of correlation of census data. You can always take a look at the raw data, but to correlate it into something usable, and AI is doing that. So for people who are looking at population studies, AI is pretty cool for that too.
Yeah, I think that the world is adapting, and so the communication style is changing, I think, to now where if it's easy to send a long email, then whereas that used to take a long time to send a long email. A few years ago, you would read a longer email that someone sent you, and you would think, okay, they've really taken some time to write out a long email. Whereas now, that you would assume, you see a long email, this has been written by AI, and so I think now we're going to really crave very short, punchy emails, like you were saying, Carl, above the fold, right?
That's my style.
Yeah, nice. Nice half sentences. Here's 4 half sentences and we're out. It's like, but then more conversation, right? Like actually, let's meet and talk about this. I wonder, Sky, about the human, the need for human interaction. And I think about now, it's things as simple as birthday messages or things like that. I think, is it enough to send just a few, a couple of paragraphs wishing them happy birthday, when you might question, was that done by AI? Do we now send a video message, because to try to have more of that human touch? And of course that could be AI as well, right? But at some point there's like a need to actually.
Well, I do think.
Obviously,
I think there's a value to there's something that's valuable, and I was listening to somebody else talking about this, that as things become more mechanized, whether that's right, we've been mechanizing things for the last couple hundred years, and now we're just mechanizing ideas, right? Like, like that's the, that's the next step of this, is that we're just, the industrial revolution is now moving toward into the land of ideas and art and all these other things. And people who are complaining about being replaced now, I'm kind of like, well, where were you when they were replacing all the,
the buggy whips,
the scribes? I'm like, think of all the scribes that lost their job when the press came out, and they're like, like, what am I supposed to do now?
Typing pools.
Yeah. So the
phone exchanges and things like that. Yeah.
All of those things, we keep on, making better, but I think it often brings the value back to things that are human, like a lot of times. I know that I was trying to figure out, like, I am very, I generally don't like gifts. Like some people have sent me ones and hit the mark, but I generally don't like to get gifts. And I realized what it was. It took me a little while to process it. Is like the chances of me giving me a gift that isn't handmade, that isn't something personal. Like if you made it or someone else like that, that's something But if someone gives me a gift otherwise, the chances of them giving me something that I like is really low. Like it's just, I'm super particular, and I'm particular about my space. And then I feel bad because now I have this thing that I feel bad about. I don't want to give it away. I don't want to get,
you probably already own it, Alex. That's why.
I own most of what I want. Like, and so I own, like, I don't have everything, but what I don't have that I want is really expensive. Everything else I've already decided that I didn't, if you want to get me, if you want to buy me a Ronin 4D 8K, and everything else as a gift, there you go. I'm giving you my list.
Or the immersive camera. The
immersive camera. I'm there. So those kinds of things I'm in for. A 17K camera, totally there. But if you're gonna get me a shirt, like, just know that I very, very. It's like I walk into like a Banana Republic. Which I only go to Banana Republic and Eddie Bauer, and when I walk in, the chances of me finding a shirt in the whole store that I want is about 1%. Like, I just wander in because I'm nearby, and I wander through and I go, nope, nothing here I like, and I leave. But every once in a while, how I slowly build up a thing is that every once in a while I find something. Oh yeah, I kind of like this, but like 1 out of every 10 trips, and so anyway, the point is that I don't. But my daughter makes me these. My daughter makes me rocks. See, she paints. So this is, I can go. This one's kind of. That one won't look good on. But I get things like Dad, right? Like
nice.
Somehow I can't get it. But Dad.
Yeah.
Or I get, I have these little, I don't, like, she made me one here that said, it's a meme, but it stonks, health and tech. And anyway, so I get these, she makes me these rocks. I have all of them here. Like that, like I'll save all of those things because it's made by her, for me. And that has value way beyond a rock. Right. But but things that are just kind of made, like I don't. And so I think that the thing is that I think that, again, the stuff we're talking about doing live from studios, live in other places, and I think the art and everything else being very personal, I think there's going to become more valuable, but you got to figure out how to do it. Artists that aren't good at being personal are going to have trouble. Like they're going to have a lot of trouble, like keeping up. If you're just an artist making music and you're not connecting with your fans and you're not building a community around what you're doing, the music by itself, I don't think is going to be that valuable. Like I think that, because there's going to be so much AI music, that if you're not doing something that feels personal, I think that you're going to have a really hard time as any kind of creator space person. You're going to have trouble with that.
Yeah. I'm challenged at the moment. It's interesting coming out of COVID, where we were forced to be isolated. Now it feels like where the world is probably more isolated now than ever, and because there's less of those sort of community activities, or it seems that you're involved in. And the challenge for me at the moment is I have lots of this going on, which I really love, and I don't, I really love this. It's been amazing, right? The challenge for me is, when do I get into a small group in person? When do I do that, and just interact with people around a common interest or whatever? I heard Leo on This Week in Tech on Sunday just saying about how he goes and plays chess on Monday afternoons at the cafe in Petaluma. He could totally play chess on chess.com and, play all sorts of different people, and he could do, if it's just about chess. But it wasn't just about chess. It's actually about, being with other humans in a space. And so I am challenged by that idea of what, because of this, we've got so much content and so much stuff going on. When do we just hang out with people,
And for me, my version of hanging out is usually doing something that'd be kind of fun, like the concert that I did. Some people show up. We all do a little bit of work together. And I have a tendency to want to be doing something I'm not as good at being. I'm more good at doing.
Playing chess.
Sorry.
Playing chess.
Not
as good as just sitting playing chess. Yeah.
No, I'm not. But I like, learning with other people and taking something on that we haven't done before, and stretching and everything else. And so I think that that is and I think that's, and I do like to have, a barbecue or a dinner or something like that. I find that I have gotten, and it started happening during COVID, but I got so particular about my food that now I'm so, like, I buy everything at a farmer's market. Like if I buy like butter at Whole Foods, but that's about it, and almost everything's at farmer's markets, and I make all of that stuff from scratch. I don't think about it anymore, but it makes me very resistant. I feel horrible after every time I go out to eat. If I go out to a restaurant, like whatever they're putting in it, my body is not used to that anymore. Like I'm completely out. So I feel like that's also pushed me away from interacting with, going out. So what I tend to do is invite people to come over to the house. Like, hey, everybody, like, I think Vienna is coming out next month. We think that she's going to be able to stop by next month. Of course, it's cool. Between it's between her doing it's a typical Vienna thing. She is doing a half marathon and then going to NASA, and there's like a day in between, so she might stop by. But, I'll do a get together and we'll see who in office hours wants to come by and hang out at the house. But I've learned that I need to control like what we're eating, because otherwise if I go out to somewhere, I'll be miserable. Like I'll just be like, oh, I can't believe I did this, kind of thing. So,
well, I mean, NAB was a good example of, like, we could have just caught up and walked around together, but actually doing, a live
Having some
stream
kind of
and
context.
testing stuff. Yeah. But I do think that, there's something about common experience that brings people together, but it's not just the experience. I think something common mission, when people have a, particularly when they're doing something good for other people for free, and they're volunteering together for the common good on a common mission, that's when you build long-term relationships, like that's,
I agree.
and that's the type of stuff. What's our next question there, Carl?
So next question is from John Nichols in Concord, California. Today I learned in Companion 4 you can manually enter the number in the font size of the button, 5 to 49 points. Is this new to anyone else?
This is funny. It's like, and now for something completely different. I was like, only in Office Hours. Only in Office Hours where we geek out to the point where it's not just talking about Companion, the software itself, but it's talking about the select box that now allows. And I don't know, to answer your question, Roger, I'm not sure whether you could do this before. I don't think so. I think you could just hit these, preset sizes, but now you can type in 11, use 11, and it now does font size 11. So it's world changing. I think this is just what we've been wanting, is to be able to change the font size of our buttons and Companion. So I don't know if it's new or I think it is new. There's a couple of cool things. A big shift in Companion version 4, which is brilliant, is now all the modules are separate. And so for every different device that you want to talk to, those modules are managed sort of externally now. Previously, in all the previous versions, you would be downloading a new version of Companion that had all of the modules baked in. So apart from it being very bloaty, it also was difficult to manage all those update cycles. Whereas now all the modules are handled separately for updates, and then the Companion software is managed separately as well. So, which is brilliant. That's a massive change. And then they've done a whole bunch of really cool things around variables and triggers, and it's a very impressive software. If you're not playing around with it, it's worth it. There will be devices that you already own that you can talk to with Companion. I'm confident in that statement. So, all right, next question.
Next question's from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Soon, with everyone having access to a lot of knowledge that used to be behind paywalls, what style or wisdom makes you different?
Alex?
I think I would say the number one is experience. I think that, what AI is really good at is being book smart. So if you just have a lot of knowledge based on what you read, and obviously I've said this for a long time, is that I think that theoretical knowledge is sometimes worse than no knowledge at all, because when you have no knowledge at all, you are worried that you don't know what you're ready to research it. When you have theoretical knowledge, you have some sense that you might actually know what you're talking about, and rarely do you actually know because you haven't tested it against the steel of the world. And I think that, there's so many things that make sense in your head. But I think that what then goes, past that is actual knowledge of actually doing it and actually failing and actually knowing what that looks like and what it feels like. You can read a lot of books about how to cut an onion, but you don't really know how to cut an onion until you've cut a couple hundred, and then you're starting to get to a point where you understand, like you have some kind of level of mastery. I would say the other thing is just the other style is just how you work with other people. I think it's going to become more and more important. It's going to be less and less important what you know, and more important of how well you operate on a team, how well you work with others, how imaginative you are, because you'll be able to file in all the stuff that you don't know at record speed. Like, I'm just doing it constantly. How does this work? What does this look like? What does this knob do? How does this, and my ability to learn has increased exponentially since AI has come out. But what's going to make a difference is how well you fit into with everybody else, and also taking that and applying it to something in the world.
Totally. I see John Wallace. Too many browser windows. John said everyone has always had access to knowledge. Making it easier isn't going to make most of us use it and make use of it, which is true. You know, it's like we've always had all the books and things. It's just that most people haven't read it, and so same thing. Carl.
So the way I look at AI, especially the way we're using AI right now by simply asking a question and getting a response in that kind of way, more text-based, that kind of AI assistant that we have, I look at it kind of like woodworking. So it's like you live in a town or you live on an island, and eventually someone opens a hardware store on that island. Now you have access to all the woodworking tools, but it doesn't make you a carpenter. It doesn't give you, there's two things you need to have as a carpenter. You need to have, one, the creative idea of what to create, you know, table or chair. So you have to kind of, if you don't know of them, you have to invent them. And then you have to have the technical skill to know how to build one and have it work. So that's the execution of the idea. So what AI doesn't give you, just because you're paying a subscription for ChatGPT, that doesn't give you the idea, and it doesn't give you the technical ability to execute that idea. So they're the two things that are still human, and they will always be human. Now, you can have an idea generator, but an idea generator, what it can do is you give it the parameters. And I think this is actually going to be a very important job in the future for humans who will use AI as a tool, just like a carpenter uses woodworking tools and a woodworking shop. The whole shop is important as well. As their tool. And what that is you're going to have a data set you have that may be unique to you or someone else's data set, and the prompt. What do you want from this data set? And that what you want from this data set is kind of what do you want to build with the wood? And the data set is the tools and the wood itself. So these are the tools you have available. This is the wood available. So what can you do with the data set? What can you do with the prompt? And I think that's where humans, like, we can see that right now with the amount of stormtroopers and Bigfoots that have infiltrated my feed. As far as videos coming out of AI, it's kind of interesting. I know there's some collabs with Bigfoot and stormtroopers in the same video, which is interesting as well. But when we start to have people who have interesting ideas and then push a story thread through, that's actually where it's more important than just technically what we can do with it. So I can cut a piece of wood, you know, in half, and then I can cut that piece of wood in half again and half again. That's no creativity there, unless I just want to make sawdust. But so that's the important thing with AI, is that if you have an idea, and then you have two, the tools, and AI is part of the tool, but the data set you put into AI is also important. So I said earlier about population data, so census data. So you can gather a lot of information from census data where to open a new McDonald's, for instance. And McDonald's actually does this. They actually use census data to decide where they're going to open a new restaurant. When new suburbs, you know, how the population has to get to a certain density in a certain area before they open a McDonald's restaurant, or it's not going to be profitable. And the way they do this is via census data. So you can see those kind of people who need to make decisions, and they use data, and they can probably get out the data much faster now they have these AI tools, or they create their own AI model that will give them specifically where to open a new restaurant. So these are the things that the humans will still always be required for, is what are we using the AI for? Because AI can it can churn the data, not a problem. It can be an idea generator based on previous ideas, but having interesting new concepts or applying a data set to a new idea, that's something that humans are usually quite good at. It's what's known as abstract thought. When computers or AI starts to generate abstract thought, that will be truly when we have artificial intelligence, what they call AGI, I guess. Because abstract thought is something that humans get, but not all humans are very good at it, and it's kind of rare for a human to continuously do it as well.
Good one. Next question.
So next question is from Ros McNulty. In Vancouver, I have convinced a local ballet group to do a spatial filming for the Apple Vision Pro. We have a camera that works for immersive and spatial. What about lighting and depth of field?
Alex?
Well, one of the big things that you'll have, depth of field, you want to try to minimize to some degree because you're going to be looking at it all there. So that's one piece of it. So you tend to want to stop down. The problem is if you start doing the higher frame rates, that you need for the Vision Pro, or that you may want to have for the Vision Pro. You need a lot more light. So it depends on what kind of camera you're using. If you're getting, I would consider for the Vision Pro 60 frames per second kind of minimum viable at this point. So 60 frames a second, maybe 50 frames a second, I guess, in Canada, or more. I guess Canada's still 60. But what the Vision Pro can do is 90. And so the question is, can you get your camera to 90? And it does look a lot better. Live wants to have more frames. So that's the challenge that you have. But you want to reduce the depth of field, or increase the depth of field by reducing your aperture, which confusingly means the number is going up. So you know that, Roz. I'm just explaining to other people who are there. So getting into a 5.6 or higher is usually something you want to try to shoot for this type of thing, so that you don't have a lot of depth of field and people can see what's going on. But then again, you just need a lot more lighting. The thing you have to be careful of is where you're going to put the lighting. So there's 180 degrees that you don't have access to, so or that you make it part of the scene. So those are the things to kind of think about.
Carl?
So as Alex said, like these 180 lenses, and stereo will have 2 of them generally for, of course, immersive. Just by the nature of their short focal length, like I believe the Canon one's like 7 or 8 millimeters for their full frame version. We don't know what the focal length is. I don't believe we know what the focal length is of the Blackmagic one yet, because we don't know well, we kind of do, but we can guess it. So essentially, it's going to have a very long depth of field anyway, even if you're full open. You may have maybe the first meter in front of the camera will be out of focus, but pretty much the hyperfocal distance, which is everything, will be in focus after that. So the way you actually introduce depth of field or depth of the image is 1, lighting, and 2, atmospherics. So you always notice on all music videos, they have some haze machine in the background, some fog machine in the background, and they have this perfect kind of mist behind the talent. And that gives you depth of the image. This naturally happens, of course, when you look at landscapes. The more atmosphere you look through, the more hazy, the more lower contrast it is. So you can actually do this lower contrast by lighting. So this is a trick you can do on stage without even a haze machine. You can have lower contrast elements behind, right at the background, and you light them in a low contrast way, which is very flat. And then as you get closer and closer to the talent, which will probably be the thing in the foreground, then that will be high contrast. And by having this high contrast or low contrast, that's how we see the world anyway, because of atmospheric dispersion and all that. So you can actually create this depth effect without chucking in bokeh. Because bokeh is one way, of course, and all bokeh is doing is just making low contrast anyway, because it's taking the background and spreading it out. And so any sharp edges, like if you have a zebra, if you take a zebra and throw it in the background and put it out of focus, it becomes a grey horse. Because that's all it is. It's just a grey horse. Once the bokeh is large enough, once you're out of focus enough, there's no black and white stripes anymore. We can generally tell based on the pattern still within the bokeh, but it becomes just a grey horse. And that's what you're doing here in immersive. If you need everything to be sharp and you don't want to bring a haze machine in, then you design your set. So the background is low contrast, and there's a few ways to do that. You can do that with nets and scrims. Other ways is to use a haze or fog machine, but you want to be careful not to get that too close to the talent. And then as you come closer and closer and closer to the lens, you make the lighting more contrasty, so usually more spot, or use silver reflectors, those kind of things. And you make the costumes, the set design, whatever, also more contrasty. So, and this is done subtly in many movies, and you just don't notice it because set designers, cinematographers, they all just know this kind of language. And in music videos, they do it quickly by using a haze machine. That's why in the background of a music video, they just use a haze machine because it's faster, because they usually have to have a quick turnaround, because in the old days, the artist paid for the music video. So $500,000 was coming from the artist, usually from their advance, to actually make the music video. And then they made any profit back on that. So that was actually similar to how concerts work now. Artists make generally the profit from the concerts and not from the record label for the recording anyway. So there's a lot of techniques there in immersive I think we can take from music video for live immersive, which is just put haze in the background, or have low contrast, or have a lot of wide wash light in the background, and a lot of more pointy light in the foreground, and that will give you depth without having to worry about bokeh. The other thing is, as Alex mentioned, like frame rate. Yes, you want to get the high frame rate, 60 up to, like we have 80 and 90 frames a second immersive cameras now. Looks like Canon's going to be doing an update to allow a higher frame rate as well in their current camera, which is a R5 Mark II. that may be coming. We're hearing rumors because that camera's already supported for the immersive. Whether it can do a higher frame rate than currently 8K 60, we don't know. They may do a higher frame rate, but just do a bit of line skippy, so therefore have a lower resolution and have the high frame rate, so like 4K 120 kind of thing. So hopefully those kind of things eventuate in cameras that are not going to be $30,000. At the moment, the R7 is probably the cheapest way to get into immersive, like true immersive with 280-degree lenses, and it's going to support Apple's new encapsulating format. So Apple has this new workflow now, which there has been a workflow in the past, but Apple's just kind of crystallized it, and they announced it at DubDub that they have this workflow now for spatial, which Canon are on board with and Blackmagic are on board with. So my guess is going into DaVinci Resolve. Canon already has software that does this, and now Apple has just given it a name. That's the only difference, but Canon's already been doing this. So it's really interesting, but if you want to get depth into your shot and you're using 180-degree lenses, in other words, most of the stuff's going to be in focus anyway, think about how to use lighting and atmospherics to do that. And also extras. You don't want extras in the background with bold prints. You want them to look like they come from, a communist country in the 1970s. So these drab kind of greys, low contrast for the background extras so they don't stand out, and have your talent stand out, having bold, high contrast wardrobe and makeup as well.
Good one. Roz, something I would think about is the placement of the camera, because there's something about immersive particularly that is putting us in a position where we may not normally be able to. The Apple kind of demos and examples that they're doing at the moment are good, like the bull riding, the rodeo, is a good example. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that close to those beasts, and yet I can be with this. I'd love to sit in the studio with Alicia Keys, and now I can sit at the end of the piano, and can kind of sit there with her. That's kind of amazing. So with ballet, the questions I'd have for you is, what is the optimal viewing position for ballet? Is it, I think it's stage, and I think we're used to, stages used to be more raked than they are now, for the perspective of being able to see the depth, to be able to see more of what's going on across the whole stage. So the question for me is, what height should the camera be at? Should it be at, as if you were standing downstage center looking at the stage and at eye height with the performers? Or is it, a little bit more elevated? And they're the sorts of things that I wonder about, is what is that optimal position? Because I think not moving the camera too much, I think is ideal, to have this sense of the movement is all happening there, the camera's not moving itself. It's one of those experiences that we had, Tucker and I spoke about at the Sphere in Vegas. It was one of the coolest parts of the show we saw was when it was a theatre, and it kind of, the camera moved in and then it just stopped, and you could just see the theatre stage and curtains, and then you just sat and you watched this, which was a really cool experience. And I think this similarly for that. So they're the things I'd be thinking about, is the optimal camera position for recording it. And hopefully it's not with an audience, because you want to put your camera wherever you want it best to be and not worry about an audience seeing a camera. So next question.
From Michael Boyknott in Richmond, Virginia. What will have a bigger impact on event production, AI or automation, i.e. companion? Being able to operate more positions seems to be more immediate, seems to be a more immediate impact. Thoughts?
Carl?
So I always look at Eurovision each year carefully, how they produce it. So I think Eurovision is down to 2 camera operators. That may sound absolutely crazy for one of the biggest TV shows in the world, but each musical song, each song essentially, is highly rehearsed. They do pretty much 3 weeks So the artists will come in and they'll do 3 weeks of rehearsals. And what they're actually doing is they're making live music videos. And the blocking, so where the performer is on stage, and which camera, and what focal length that camera's going to have, and all these kind of things. So I believe the only two for that particular element of the show, which is the song, let's call it the song element. There's a Steadicam operator on stage. There's a human element, and there's usually one person operating a camera that's usually front of stage. All the rest are PTZs, but these PTZs are controlled by software. It's pretty high-end software too. And so they actually do these rehearsals and they actually block out exactly where the performer is. And this is the thing, this is why these performers who enter Eurovision are usually veterans. There's very few teenagers get up there, and if the teenagers do get up, they usually stand still, because only the veterans will walk around the stage, because they have to hit their marks exactly to the click track. They're hearing a click track as well, so they're hearing playback, but also a click track. So the performer needs to make sure they are in the correct space. And over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of LED walls and interaction with LED walls in real time. One of these I think it was Denmark one a few years ago, with this artist who actually interacts with an animation live. So it's pretty cool. So we've seen this spoof before, of course, where college professors will interact with themselves, but this was done. It had to be done live, had to be done to a song, had to be done. It's live broadcast, but also live in front of an audience. So you see these kind of interactions. So because Eurovision only has probably 2 or 3 camera operators for the actual song portion of the show, and then when they have the presenter green room, that's all, of course, camera operators, camera on a shoulder, camera on a Steadicam kind of thing. But those kind of elements, it tells you already, because each of those song segments, there is no live music allowed in Eurovision. It must be playback. Those playback, of course, are timed to a click track. So everything that happens to the song. The only thing that actually happens live is there's a human being on stage and that their voice is live into a microphone. That's it. Everything else has to be recorded. If you have backing singers who are not on stage, but you have backing singers in the song, those backing singers must be singing live, and they must be singing live just behind off stage. So that's kind of the rules for Eurovision. It's really interesting, but because of those rules, you get these really creative, because there's that restriction that you're not allowed to have live music on stage. If you see a band on stage, they're miming the music, but they're not miming the singing. So that's the rules, which makes it really interesting, but it means you can be really tight with your camera operations, with your lighting, with everything, because everything is cued to the song, and the song has to be ready like 3 months ahead of time. So you have to give the song over to the people running the show, like by the beginning of March, I think, maybe 2 months, 2.5 months. And the show, of course, is usually in the second half of May. So they have 2.5 months to do the lighting cues for the song. And then each song has its own art director. So you have like 36 art directors into one show. So each song is its own nation, brings its own entire crew that comes in. And they want props built, everything. And then the only thing that they don't do is operate the cameras, but they get to ask where the cameras go, and they don't get to operate the lighting, but they get to ask what type of lighting they want. So they really are a creative director, and the technical people who run the whole show, they just implement what that creative person wants. So there's months and months and months of this kind of back and forth between the technical team that runs the show and the creative people for each country. So there's 30 odd countries. So if you want to look at like where we're going, look at how they make Eurovision each year, and you'll see there just the. But there is one thing about Eurovision, it is to a click track. So the song portion is to a click track. It can be queued, and it can be queued months ahead of time, and they just tweak that queue as they go through rehearsals and make sure lighting and blocking of where the performer is on stage. The performers who stand in one spot makes it really easy, obviously, so they have to bring in dynamicism for that. So they bring in a crane camera, and they bring in a Steadicam operator. So if a performer is just singing like a singer-songwriter style song, they will have more dynamic cameras. If it's like a crazy song, with a death metal band from Finland, they don't need to worry about that too much. They can just have, standard kind of 3 camera shots and let the death metal band just do their thing. So this is kind of interesting. I would really, if you want to look at the future, look at what they're doing right now in Eurovision. Each production company, so every year it's a different production company. Sometimes, of course, a country will win twice, or a country will hire a production company from another one. So the previous one that just happened in Switzerland, they took the production company that did Liverpool. So Liverpool hosted it a couple of years ago. That same production company flew over to Switzerland, and they ran the show for the team in Switzerland. So it's really interesting if you want to take a look at the future. There are other things as well in having no humans around. We talked a little bit about SpaceX before. SpaceX is a good example, and if you actually go back and take a look at their launches in the past, and well, even just the Starship launches that have happened, which we're up to number 8 or 9 now. Take a look at their first one and how they covered it with drones and covered it with cameras at the launch pad and cameras further away, and then watch each launch and see what they've added each time. So now the launch actually happens from when it lifts off from the pad. That's all done by a drone. So that's pretty much a drone just covering it all the way up until it goes out of the drone's view, and then they go to a wider camera or a further away camera just getting a normal shot from the ground. But pretty much the takeoff itself from what SpaceX does now is from a drone. Now we're only seeing this happen in Starship world. We're not seeing this happen in Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is just PTZ cameras that are bolted to the side of the pad. So because they launch a Falcon 9 every 2 days for Starlink, they're not going to have a drone out there every 2 days unless it's a human spaceflight. So human spaceflight, when they're launching out from Florida, they will have a drone further away. They're not allowed to have a drone within. There's a keep out sphere, so which they don't have, of course, for testing. There's no humans on board. So because there's a keep out sphere, the drone has to be further away, more closer to the Atlantic Ocean rather than closer to the pad. But yeah, so another way other than Eurovision, I'll take a look at what SpaceX has done over the last, probably since COVID, since 2020, and look how they've which cameras, where they place their cameras, and when they switch to those cameras during each of their launches. And you'll see a big change as well, how they're doing automated AI, not really, but how they're doing production. There is a vision switcher in the background, of course, changing the name Jamie. So Jamie's deciding which camera to cut to and when. And Jamie also adheres to the 180-degree rule. Alex has mentioned this in the past, the 180-degree rules. So Jamie actually adheres to this rule so you can't go from one side of the rocket to the other side of the rocket without going to a wide shot first to re-establish the 180-degree rules, which is really bizarre for a rocket, but Jamie chooses to do this. It makes sense. It's so you, the viewer, thinking, is the rocket going left or is the rocket going right? So it's kind of an interesting thing to think of. We do the same with car chases, though. So Jerry Bruckheimer famously uses the 180-degree rule for car chases. So if you watch a movie, The Rock, with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery, there's a car chase at the beginning of that, and Bruckheimer talks about using the 180-degree rule. So if a car's going left to right, it should be going left to right, and if we see it going from right to left, we need to see that in shot. So that's a whole other thing too. But yeah, so automation as far as production, live production, I would definitely think about looking at Eurovision and take a look at other things where there is no camera operators, and SpaceX is a good example of that too.
That was an extensive answer, Carl. It was
a 2 or 3 to
impressive. Yeah, it was a little bit, yes. Alex?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's a little tricky about trying to automate things is the more you automate it, the more you create the potential for a cascading failure. So when you don't have people in there paying attention to those things, and people who have enough skill set and they're focused on enough of one thing. So when you're talking about live event, when you're specifically event production, there's a lot of things that automation does really well. But as you start to go into event production, it's really easy to you start stacking up. I watch people in events, many people who I'll bid on something and I will put a lot of people in the team, and then someone will underbid me and have a bunch of automation. They've got Companion, they've got all this other stuff, and they're doing all. And then they hit the wrong button or something, or they have to make a change in the middle of the show, and it just goes haywire. Like, because there's no people there to figure it out and to absorb it and to talk through it. And so I think that I don't know how much more efficient an event can get. You have a big event like Eurovision that makes sense with automated cameras, but when you talk about the kind of events that I do for Fortune 100 or Fortune 10 companies, we've wrung out most of the efficiency, and if you start taking people out, you're starting to put yourself in harm's way. So I think that I think that I don't know, and again, it depends. There's some events, we're trying to eventually get office hours to something. I mean, this show is actually done with a lot less people than the one in the morning, but I think that it doesn't have the same level of production value as well, and things can go wrong here in a way that wouldn't go wrong in the morning, because we have more people who are really smart, who can think through that stuff, and so it's a very resilient system. So I'm not saying that it would never happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think a lot of people, what I really find amazing about AI is the ability to think big. Give me an idea about what this would look like, or give me some idea, from a brainstorming perspective, AI I find to be incredibly powerful. So it makes the events better. I don't know how many less people I would hire based on AI or automation anytime soon.
Yeah, I think about this a fair bit because I think AV production, particularly for live events, like corporate events, is ripe for disruption. It's some sort of device that's going to come in and kind of work it all out. And I can see it. Some of the boardroom systems, the conference systems, are getting better and better. I was just on a meeting recently, and there was, it's a large boardroom with 20 seats or something, and the cameras were picking up, like it was auto switching to who was talking. The audio was locking in, like it was beamforming into the people that were speaking, and was pretty good. It's still not amazing, but it's getting better and better all the time. And so I think it's coming. I think more of that's coming, particularly so much of the death by PowerPoint type events that happen in every convention center around the world. Lots of those, I think, will be able to be automated, the recording of such and stuff.
I think that the question is do we want to automate it, or do we just want to get rid of it? Like, I think that, I think that,
education in general.
I know I'm attacking our own business, but like there's this whole thing about, I follow a lot of educators, and we've talked about this direct instruction versus, project-based learning. That's kind of a big one that people talk about. And direct instruction, there's parts of it that are really useful, that we're going to show you some things, and then we're going to talk about them, and it's going to be an orderly way of learning it. And of course, according to direct instruction folks, project-based learning is just chaos. It's chaos. But I think that the interesting thing is that when they say, and then you have people who say, well, we should just format the whole thing. Like, we just format the class. My whole thing is, if you're going to format the class, just make a video. Like, if you're going to, which I think is, by the way, the best education that I've ever seen, that I've ever been part of, was formatted. Like, there is a folder, there is someone up there with a piece of paper. I bet you, I don't know if Tony Robbins does this, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's got a big folder up there that he goes, you see him, does he do the paper from one, does he have like a binder up there somewhere? He probably knows it so well. I've never seen
that, but he's got notes in front of him, on screens and stuff.
Yeah, these are notes. They're not there to tell that he's not reading a teleprompter, but this is the process, right? There's a process that they have figured out. And so the thing is the teacher's having the process, of this is how you teach this thing. What I think somewhere in the future, when you talk about AI and doing a lot of this other stuff, you have the movies, and I think that the movies that you do, whether it's education or other things, can be, a lot of my presentations now are full of objects. And I mean, one of the things that I'm starting to work on is building 3D objects of stuff like this. I mean, not this, but things like this, and making them USDZ so that I can animate, I can animate the object and point to things and do things. And so you could create some stuff that's really pleasurable to look at. Then you can fill it in with AI, then still have a discussion, and that discussion can be structured for the teacher to kind of know this is the best way to get from this here to here. Then you have projects so everyone gets to play with it and on kind of an open field. And then you come back and have more Q&A. And I think that's where I think AI is going to get really interesting, as part of building the imagery, as part of help thinking about the structure. I was talking to somebody today that they said a lot of their class structures are being, they're give me some ideas on how would I structure teaching this? And they don't take it verbatim, but it's a great way to brainstorm.
It's a great question, Michael, that you've brought up, because I think what we're talking about is live event production and where that goes. And with what I'm saying about the convention center, Alex, is really possibly just a faster horse when we're looking for a car, actually the next thing is the car, and we don't need a fast horse.
I look at conventions and I don't go to any of this. I rarely go to any of the sessions. I see all these people in the session. I'm like, I must be missing something, because I get there and I'm just like, oh, I can't sit through this. I go there, and I think part of it is I only go right now to conventions that I've gone to many, many times. And so I've got lots of people to see. So there's lots of people that I got to run into. And then I want to go see the expo, and I want to talk to everyone. And I very rarely have time to actually go to a session. And I really wish the sessions were just sometime before the show, like just online, over Zoom, you know, like, or some kind of broadcast like what we do here.
Yes,
and do
Blackmagic do that, don't they? So Blackmagic do that for
They
NAB.
do, except the problem with it is that what I want is more interaction. Like, you know, like that's what, you know, being able to do Q&A. I mean, I would love for Blackmagic to do their thing, and then
have a Q&A.
And
It'd be nice if they had two. They did two. So it'd be nice if they
Amazing.
did their presentation and then came back a few days later and answered questions. That'd be really nice as well. Both can still be video formatted. Both can still be edited. But I think what you're saying there, Alex, is actually a really good idea of give out the information beforehand. So when you get there and you've got that networking experience and you want to do that networking rather than that discovery, that's a really good idea.
In the handful of times that we've done it, what we've seen is that only 10 or 15% of the people will watch the videos, but the entire conversation is better. You know, the entire conversation is better because those 10 or 15% ask all the questions.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last question there.
So last question is coming in from Ros McNulty. Any promised dates or estimates on the Blackmagic Ursa Cine Immersive?
Alex?
No promises, but I think that most people think that August is when we're going to start seeing cameras pop out. So I think most of us are tracking for August or September that the cameras are going to come out. And it's but there's some people that are starting to at least hear that they might be able to get to test it for a week or two, but we haven't. I don't have any dates. So there you go.
Do we know of any productions that are currently using it?
They're using it they're shooting a production with it. The first production outside of Apple, I can't remember what it is. I think it's either a documentary or a sports thing or something like that just got announced last week. And I don't know if they have it yet, but they've announced that they're going to release it or they're going to put it out this fall. So there's productions ramping up for it. And I think that the rumor is that the camera's pretty much done and it's just figuring out all the integration.
All right. We've run a little bit over. And that's what happens when we have the panelists that we have here tonight. So, Alex, content recommendation.
So my content recommendation, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say, so I'm not going to say how I saw it, but my content recommendation is F1. It is. Oh. I saw it last week, and okay. So I got an early screening of F1, and it's really incredible. Like, I just have to say, it's an amazing film, the footage is just stunning, you know. And there's only one place that I can see the visual effects, and it's not a real visual effect. It's a subtle effect that's done through most of the movie that bothers me. But outside of that, the visual effects just feel seamless. Like, you don't feel like you're seeing anything. That the physics feel good. And they did so much of it where they really wanted to. There was it was very physically driven. So it's really good.
Have you watched the Immersive?
Yeah. Oh. Go ahead. The Immersive. Oh my gosh, it made me very uncomfortable. Like, it was the first time in the AVP that I was like, I'm really feeling. If I didn't have a thick stomach, I would get sick.
Side of the car.
They sat you on the side of the car and they're running around at full tilt through the. You know, I guess Brad Pitt is driving the car and you're in it, and there were definitely some times where I started to feel myself a little disoriented, and you know, I think that if it was higher resolution and higher frame rate, it probably would have bothered me. And I definitely think there are people that would definitely not be able to watch that. Like that, they're pushing the outer edge of what can we do with immersive, and I think they might have found it.
Yeah.
So that's just short of the edge for me. So
the film gets released here in 2 days here in Australia, so on Thursday. The interesting thing is, this is the film I have probably seen the most making of before the film's ever come out, because I subscribe to F1 TV. I watch F1 every weekend when it's on. F1. So I have seen, and I know all the ins and outs, because you've got to remember right in the middle of F1.
Alex. Thank you.
Yeah. All I was going to say, I gotta jump here, but all I was going to say is that the reason I recommended it is because you're going to want to see it in a big screen. It is. I don't know if it'll translate to a small screen. What I saw on a big beautiful screen and what you could see on an Apple Vision Pro is amazing. But I don't know if it translates down into a 85-inch or 75-inch screen TV, and it definitely doesn't go down to an iPad. You won't feel the same. It's a big screen film. So anyway,
okay.
Thanks everybody.
Good. Thanks. See you, Alex. Yeah, I thought Carl, I thought you would have a fair bit to say about it, because it'll be. I think your analysis of it will be interesting afterwards
when
too,
I see
as
it,
to
yeah,
whether
so
it
next weekend,
really lives up to it.
That's the thing. The interesting thing was also the whole, all behind the scenes, how this got. This is a passion project. So to understand what this is Eddie Q from Apple. So there was rumors a long time ago when F1 was up for sale that Apple would buy F1, because Eddie Q is the maddest F1 fan. He's on the board of Ferrari, so he's a part of. He's on the board of a Formula One team. Eddie Q. People who don't know, Eddie Q is a person who not only is in charge of Apple TV, he created Apple TV. He was a person under Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs talks about this in his biography, that he cracked television. And when he said he cracked television, it was Eddie Q was the person whose job was to go and create Apple Television, the service, on top of Apple Television, the product. So there are two separate things there. Anyway, so Eddie Q's the mad fit. He's one that's pushed for this. He got Brad Pitt on board. That's it. That's kind of the green light. Once you get Brad Pitt, you get a green light. Apple's got the money to make it. But they also needed F1 to be on board. F1 has this enormous push into America. They have 3 races in America now. So they have enormous push. That's where they believe the growth of F1 is. It's a European sport. They want to push into the United States, into North America. So technically in North America, they have 5 races, 1 in Mexico, 1 in Canada, 3 in the United States. So because they're pushing for this, it's really interesting. But the making of it was fascinating, because they had to film over 2 separate seasons. And there was the very first Vegas race. So the race in Vegas was... it was definitely coming. It wasn't made for the movie, but they wanted to film at the Vegas race, the very first Vegas race, which is now 2 years ago. Now, before that Vegas race, there was the actors' strike and the writers' strike, you may remember. And the interesting thing is, Fran Drescher, who was in charge of the Actors Union, the Actors Guild, lifted the strike days just before the Grand Prix in Las Vegas, because they could do certain stuff with doubles in the cars, but they couldn't do certain stuff without Brad Pitt walking down the strip middle of the night on an F1 grid. So that had to happen, and they had to lift the actors' strike. So the rumor is that Brad Pitt ran Fran Drescher and said, suspend the strike, I need to work in Vegas this weekend. We can't do this next weekend. So that was a rumor. If you go take a look at the news, Fran Drescher says, we're suspending the strike. And that was because the rumor is Brad Pitt rang Fran Drescher directly and said, Fran, you got to stop. If people who don't know, Fran Drescher was the nanny, TV show The Nanny. She's now the president of the Actors Guild. So that's the rumor. No one's ever substantiated it, but it's believable, because she said they weren't dropping it. They were just suspending it, the strike. And it was suspended like a week before Vegas, because Brad Pitt had to work. There was no way he was going to break the strike. He wasn't going to walk across the picket line, but he also needed to figure out a way to work and keep the Actors Guild to save face. So hence Fran Drescher suspended the strike. And the rumor is it's because of Brad Pitt and this movie F1 was the reason, because there was no way. Every other movie can go, we can come back a week later and do it, whatever. Yes, it's going to be expensive. That couldn't happen. Formula One can only be in Las Vegas that one weekend, and Brad Pitt has to be on the grid. He's on the grid at every race, like Silverstone and stuff. If you watch the live television broadcast, so I was watching it, there's Brad Pitt during the national anthems. Brad Pitt would be on the end of the line. Well, him and his fellow actor would be on the end of the line. Now, the live television broadcast that was called the World Feed, they were told, try not to shoot Brad Pitt. But of course, there was wide shots of all the drivers standing there for the national anthem, and there's Brad Pitt standing on the right-hand side. This was 2 years ago. This is when there was very little information about the movie. And then, so they shot over 2 racing seasons, so that'd be 2023 and 2024. And then here we are, 2025. And it was, just now we're just seeing the world premiere because of the North American race, the Canadian race. So all the drivers are in North America. They flew down from Montreal down to New York, did the world premiere, and they'll fly back to Monaco, I guess. But yeah, fascinating movie. Can't wait to actually see the movie. I've seen a lot of how it was made, but I haven't actually seen the movie yet, of course.
Now, that wasn't your content recommendation. But it sounded like it. You piggybacked there a little bit.
I can keep this part short.
Keep this one short, yeah.
So my content recommendation, again, is going to be a documentary series. It's the Wonders series. So these are by Professor Brian Cox. He has done this series. So Wonders of the Solar System is kind of an homage to Cosmos by Carl Sagan, and he actually brings up Carl Sagan and Cosmos in that series. But then the BBC chose to they continued on. So the same production team did Wonders of the Universe, Wonders of Life, Human Universe, and Forces of Nature. So these series were all shot over, I believe, about a 5 or 6 year period, all done by the same presenter, done by the same production team. Really cool if you want to understand how to do pretty much scripted documentary. This is a really good production. This is high production. because they're trying to do an homage to Cosmos, which was in its own day, back in 79, 1980, was a high production documentary, very narrative based in a way. It's not a narrative as far as storytelling, but the presenter does take you through a narrative of how these discoveries, in science, and in astronomy, I guess, in some of these, how they unfolded. So if you know Cosmos, you know Carl Sagan and how Carl Sagan delivers. Brian Cox does something similar. So, but these series are pretty good. They're very high quality, and you can find them on any streaming service that carries BBC, of course.
Very good. I've just started Murderbot. Quite enjoying that. No spoilers because I've only just started.
I've heard a lot about it, but I haven't started it yet.
Yeah, I'm easing into it so that it can be finished by the time that I catch up, because I'm sure I'll speed up and I'll start binging it, and so I want to have it all there. So awesome. We ran quite a bit longer than I thought we would, but there you go. With only two panelists, it's pretty amazing. I want to thank Alan and Peter for making it all happen in the background tonight. Without Taylor, was busy, and so it seems from our point of view it was flawless. So well done, and thank you each and every one of you that watched along with us. It is a big deal. I was just thinking before that it's it's one thing to ask for people's money, but their time often can be very valuable, and the fact that you show up and want to listen to us prattle on is quite meaningful, so thank you. So if you want to ask any other questions and things, then tomorrow morning 7 a.m. Pacific, and every day you can ask questions through officehours.global. Otherwise, join us again next week when we do it all again. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.